All right, we are recording it at this time. So considerations for your beef calves. So first and foremost, we had a presentation on this a few months back. We talked extensively on developing a calving season or establishing a calving season and bull turnout. But this is one of the things that I wanted to put in here to at least have you consider right now at this time frame. But hopefully the bulls are in the pasture. Many people that begin calving in January or February would have turned those bulls in either in April or May, depending on when you start calving. And we like to leave those bulls in about 80 days if we can, realizing that many people try to utilize a 90-day calving season. Some may be 120 or 150 or 365 right now at this point, but hopefully we can help you with some things to be able to narrow that calving season down to 80 days if possible. But what that allows you to do is number one, you're going to improve your herd fertility. Specifically speaking on calves for this presentation, we're going to have more uniform calf crops, meaning that we're going to have more calves that are similar in size and weight and in body type. By controlling a calving season, picking heifers off the front end of that calving season, we're going to be able to raise more fertile replacement heifers that will be older whenever we plan on breeding them. With having a more uniform calf crop, you're going to have more marketing options for those calves as well. So whenever we look at things that will help us to produce higher value calves, or many people might refer to it as calves with added value, or achieve some premiums on some calves. Whenever these calves go to market, however we may be selling them, if we're marketing them ourselves or if we're allowing an auction place to be selling our calves for us, they're going to look at the breed, the type, the condition, the weight, and the sex. And I've put a picture here for you. You hear many times, if you look at market reports, you might see that they were large frame number one, or large to medium frame number one and number twos. That's what it's referring to, is right here on this chart. Our higher priced calves are going to be those medium to large frame number one and number two calves, specifically the number ones. And as you can see on the frame size, the large calves are going to have a larger frame. You can see this medium frame calf kind of tightens up in its body length. You really can't tell as far as the height. But then we get into the small frame calf, smaller rib cage, a little tighter, compacted, made type animal. Then you get into the muscle thickness, and we have number ones all the way down to number fours. But number one is heavy to adequate muscling throughout, and number two is an adequate muscling. Number three, you can see we're starting to decline in the amount of muscling that we have available on the number three calf. And then number four, we get into, for lack of a better term, a bony calf that doesn't exhibit any muscle at all. And so that's how is people that are buying these calves are going to determine the price that they're able to give for these calves. Different breeds determine a calf's ability to perform as well. When we get into talking about some of our different breeds that we have, the picture on the left, if you're looking at your screen, has a variation of different colored calves, different breeds out there in the feedlot. But obviously the black calves are going to be the Angus influenced calves, and the gray or the smoky colored calves, we'd call them, those are going to be Charolais influenced calves, possibly with some English influence on the cow side with using an Angus based cow herd. Those calves, whenever we go to sell those calves, or when somebody sees a calf like that, we automatically go to thinking that it's a higher performing calf. It's going to be able to, it's going to have the growth and also be able to deposit fat quickly to get it to the days of harvest that we would desire. rather than having to keep that calf and feed it longer in the feedlot. The picture on the right of your screen is obviously a Longhorn. When we get into some of the what we call novelty type breeds, those that may be more for a niche market, or maybe just something we like to look at out in a pasture. If somebody has a specific type of breed like that, Longhorns obviously aren't known for their ability to produce meat. They're the novelty breed. We've got other breeds that are novelty breeds as well. I just use this one for an example. But when you look at that calf that's there alongside of its mother, that calf is not going to have the capabilities under no circumstances to be able to perform as the calves in the feedlot on the right. That calf will never be able to deposit fat the way that these calves in the feedlot are going to be able to, and obviously definitely won't have the muscle capacity to produce the meat that the calves in the feedlot picture are going to be able to do. So whenever we consider marketing our calves, whenever we're thinking about selling our calves, these are things that are factored into the price. Calves there pictured in the feedlot, they're obviously going to bring much more and not be discounted as the Longhorn in the picture on the right. Now we get into gender of the calves. Obviously, we break that down into three categories. We've got our steers, bulls, and our heifers. And I've put some prices here. You can go and look at several different market reports from many of the different markets around us, from Durant to Paris to Gainesville down to Sulphur Springs, and many of them are going to be the same. Steers are typically going to bring about $10 to $15 a hundredweight more than those heifer calves will, and then your bull calves are mostly going to bring, or your steers are going to bring about $6 to $15 a hundredweight more than those bull calves too. When we go through this presentation, we're going to add these prices up, and remember, we're talking about how to achieve a higher value on these calves, realizing the fact that many of our calves right now, especially our cow-calf producers, that we're in the stage of those spring-born calves for the most part. So that calf's still nursing on that cow, but it's things to think of, and I'm going to give you some vaccination protocols here in just a little bit as we go through the slide. But as we move through here, we're going to be adding these prices up, and in the end, I want you to see the value of a calf. If we perform these best management practices, how much more value we can actually put on these calves. Now, obviously, we can't control if we're getting bulls or heifers coming out of those cows if we're in a commercial situation. So we obviously have to take what we get. So right now, if you haven't sold a whole lot of calves, you're like, well, I hope all my cows have bull calves that I can steer. That way I can achieve $10 to $15 more a hundredweight per pound on those calves. But sometimes that just isn't the case. Sometimes you may end up having more heifers than you have bull calves, and there again, that's just simply beyond our control. So moving into the health and thriftiness of these calves, I want to talk to you just a little bit about preconditioning your calves. And so what preconditioning is, or backgrounding, you may have heard it referred to, is once we wean these calves off of the cow, we move them into a period in which we're going to train those calves. We're going to train them to drink out of a trough. As funny as it may sound, yes, they'll have to learn how to do that with mama not around. We're going to have to train them how to eat out of a bunk, because that's the next stage. After they leave us, they're going to a stocker operator, or some of them, depending on the weight, they may be moving right on to the feedlot. So if we can do that as a cow-calf producer, that's more value that the next person in line, whether it be the stocker operator or the feedlot operator, that they can give, because we have taken risk out of the equation for them. So whenever the time frame that you're looking at on this is a minimum of about 45 days. Sometimes you'll read that more so in the industry, they're moving more towards a 60-day preconditioning period. But you'll hear many stocker operators and many feedlots will tell you that they can take them calves at 45 days post-weaning in a preconditioned phase, or if those calves have been backgrounding, they can take them after 45 days, and there will be very few chances in which those calves will experience sickness. For those preconditioned calves, you're going to be here around our area, right here in Fannin County, around North Texas area. You're going to be somewhere between $6 to $10 a hundredweight more than stripped calves. And so basically that's what we call those blacktop weaned calves, calves that are just simply stripped off their mama and hauled straight to the sale barn. We've got a publication that was written some time ago that's actually going to tell you it's $3 to $6 a hundredweight more. But I think when we look at the times that we're in now, the demand for higher quality beef, that number, if you look all across the market reports, it's going to be about $6 to $10 more a hundredweight than those blacktop weaned or just stripped calves that we're going to see. Another thing that you want to consider if you're just stripping those calves straight off the cow and blacktop weaning them in the trailer on the way to the sale barn, you've got to incorporate in some shrink with those calves. Most calves, once they get to a sale barn, obviously they're missing mama. So the last thing they're concerned about doing is eating and drinking. They're walking around, they're bawling, they're trying to find her. Usually if we're selling those calves October, November, we're still a little bit warm during the October time frame. And so the calves, they're not drinking, they're hot, they're thirsty. They're going to shrink somewhere between 4 to 10% of their actual body weight that they go in weighing at. So let's just put this in perspective for us. If we have a 550-pound calf that we take to the sale barn that's a not weaned calf, if we just take it right in the middle of there and do a 7% shrink on a 550-pound calf, that's going to equate to 39 pounds. If we value that, and I know recently our prices haven't been the greatest, but still for a good weaned calf, you can still get on our cash market value about $1.45 per pound. Well, that times 39 pounds equals $56.55 that you lost in the shrink that occurred on that calf while he was standing there bawling, not eating, not drinking, trying to find mama. So if we add that to the value of a 550-pound calf that we said the $6 to $10 a hundredweight more that we can get on preconditioned calves, you add those two together, that plus the shrink, and if you don't precondition your calves, you're losing just shy over $100 right off the top of those calves. So if you were looking for $850 on that calf, you've now dropped down to $750 is your best starting point that you can get on those calves. Health and thriftiness is key. Moving into some best management practices. I know they're putting an ear tag in this calf right here, but obviously a calf that has horns, a yearling that has horns here. And so one thing that we want to consider on these calves, hopefully while they're at a young age, is dehorning them. The easiest way to get rid of horns on an animal is using polled bulls. If we can use homozygous polled bulls, then that's going to dehorn those calves for us, and we should have polled calves. But if you're utilizing some of our breeds that may have horns, for best example we can give is horned Herefords. If you're using those on some black cattle or some red cattle to obtain red or black baldies that do really, really well, you're probably going to have about 25% of your herd, about a fourth of your calves out of that polled cow herd is going to have horns. And so we're going to want to dehorn those calves if at all possible. If we're selling those calves and they're not dehorned, looking like this yearling right here, it equates to about a $2 a hundredweight discount that's going to be put on those calves whenever they're sold. On that 550-pound calf, that's $11. So we've now taken our total up to $111.55. Another thing, you heard me mention our difference between our bulls and our steers that we were talking about a while ago. So price difference between a bull calf and a steer calf is going to be about $6 to $15 a hundredweight. And so if you average that on that price, if we take right in the middle, right there about $10 per hundredweight on a 550-pound calf, that's going to be $55. And so whenever we're looking at that total value on a preconditioned, best managed, or calf that's had best management practices implemented on it, we're up to $166.55 here that's taken off the top of what we would want for those calves. Now, there's two ways you can go about castrating those calves. You can knife cut them, just like you see in the top picture right there, where you cut the bottom part of the scrotum. You'll take both testicles. Usually, if you pull them, if you just pull right out of the scrotal sac there, they'll come if that calf's pretty young. You might have to sever the cords there just a little bit, but a very humane practice that we do is a best management practice there. Then there's the option of banding those calves. As you can see, we've got a bander down there. There's an actual band that will go on that will squeeze the handles together. It'll open up. We'll put that over the scrotal sac there. And then once we get it all the way to the top, have both testicles in that sac, we'll let go of the clamp, and it will clamp down. It will take for it to shrivel up and fall. It's going to take somewhere around about a month for that to happen. The one risk that you do run with banding calves is you do have the risk of getting tetanus with those calves. So what we like to do if you're going to be banding your calves is you want to get those calves up 2 weeks prior to banding them and get a tetanus toxoid vaccine in those calves prior to banding them. After 2 weeks of giving that, you'll bring them back up, band the calves, and then give them a booster of that tetanus toxoid. Many of our clostridial vaccines will actually have that tetanus toxoid in them, so that's probably one of the easier ways of administering it, and you're also getting that clostridial vaccine within those calves as well. So some things to think about there, but definitely if you're not implementing castration is a best management practice right now, and if you don't know how to do it, or if you don't feel comfortable doing it, there's people that we can get you in contact with that will come out and take care of that for you. So it's just leaving $55 on the table. It's way too much. I mean, for day wages to come out and do that for you, day wages is usually around $150 a day. And so if you've got three bull calves, you've paid for it well in advance right there. So definitely something, if you're not implementing on your operation, we'd love to visit with you about how you can start castrating your calves. Moving into our vaccination portion of this, and again, we're referring to these calves that are on the cow. When I talk about the preconditioning phases, obviously that's going to be when the calves come off the cows, but some things to think about right now while we have these nursing calves within our operation. But vaccinations, usually these are going to be administered whenever our last calf is about 45 days old. This is why having those controlled calving seasons is so important, because we can actually get that whole cow herd up, all of our calves as well, and administer all of our vaccinations all at one time there. Rather than having one calf that might be 7 months old versus a calf that might be 3 weeks old, it makes it very difficult for us to do these vaccinations on these calves and be successful with it and have an annual implemented vaccination program. So whenever we look at the vaccinations that we need to be providing to these calves, we want to give them 2 doses of clostridial vaccine. It's kind of a big fancy word right there, but that's our blackleg vaccine that would give the calves. Many of you have heard of that before. Many of you are probably given a blackleg vaccine, but it's that clostridial vaccine that we want to administer. We want to give 2 doses of a viral respiratory vaccine. This includes IBR, BVD types 1 and 2, PI3, and BRSV. This is going to be many of our respiratory issues that we end up having with these calves. Also, if you give a modified live of that viral respiratory vaccine. There's some products that are a one-shot vaccine that also have that pastorella vaccination in them, included in with that viral respiratory vaccines that we vaccinate against. Then you have your anti-parasitic, and that's simply your dewormer that you're gonna provide. It's gonna protect us against those internal parasites that we could experience, and also some of those anti-parasitics are going to have external parasite control with them, depending on the label. Some of them is going to have some lice and some hornfly control there within those anti-parasitics. So some things for us to think of. Some things that we run into whenever we look at people in the next phase that'll be purchasing calves from us is many people, whenever they try to market their calves, they're going to say they've had all of their vaccinations. And then the next person in line is going to say, well, what did those vaccinations consist of? And many times the answer is, well, they've had their blackleg. Well, as you can see here, based off of this information, blackleg is only one of the vaccinations that we give. And so the biggest problems that we have with these calves whenever they come off of these cows, especially if they haven't been weaned, is getting some of these respiratory diseases that we have. I kind of give you an example. I worked in a feedlot at one time, and we would get these calves and straighten them out, and we'd buy sale barn cattle, and we bought preconditioned cattle as well. Whenever we bought those preconditioned cattle, you very rarely had any sicknesses that would occur within those calves. But we could get a truckload of the calves that were simply just weaned, blacktop weaned, again we call it, off that cow, sold through the sale barn. We could get a truckload of those calves in that weren't weaned. Obviously, they're going to be much cheaper, but we normally have up to 50% of those calves out of that load would get sick. Then you get into death loss. And so some of those calves will respond to the preventative or the vaccinations that you'll give them when they contract some of these respiratory diseases. But some of those calves wouldn't respond. Then you'd have to bring them up, vaccinate them again. Sometimes they wouldn't respond to that. And then you'd have to bring them up a third time. And so you end up having so much more money that you have to put into these calves, and not a guarantee that they'll make it. And so there again, I can't stress enough, the next person in line, whether it be the stocker or the feedlot, they can afford to pay more money for calves that have had their vaccination, for calves that have been weaned, calves that have had the best management practices implemented on them. Whenever they have to do things, so kind of going back to the last slide on the castration, whenever they have to do things such as that, there again, that's risk that they have to accept. And so that affects the price that they can give for the calves. Some optional things that we can look at on those calves is growth implants. This is something that some people do, that some people choose not to do, but an implant's going to cost you about $1.25. And we've seen from research that an implant on a nursing calf, we can add about 20 to 25 pounds of added gain on that calf through that growth implant. If you kind of go back and if we look at that 550-pound calf and we value it at $1.45 a pound, that's an additional $36.25 that we can gain off of a $1.25 investment. And so as you can see there, if you're selling weaned calves, this is something that unless you're in a branded program, now we obviously have some of the natural programs or non-implanted beef programs that are available. Again, that's through age and source verified opportunities that are available through third-party verifiers. If you're just marketing your calves, if you're selling just through a sale barn, and you're trying to market them as natural calves, a lot of times people can't give the added premium for those because there's so many risks that are associated with them. If you're marketing a natural calf, or if you have the volume that you can get into one of those third-party verified programs that are available, the agent source programs, where you can actually get in and verify that those calves are natural calves. It's gonna pay for you. Many times in our area, with our average cow herds being somewhere between around 20 to 30 head, many times we don't have the volume to be able to achieve some of those premiums such as that. So growth implants is something that a very small investment that can turn some money on the other end. I want to close with our last slide here of talking about methods of weaning. You've heard me kind of harp on the trailer method or the blacktop method, and that's one that is very common within a lot of people, mainly because of the convenience. But I hope that you can see, as we went through this presentation, the amount of money that's left on the table by doing that. We have a corral weaning method, and some people may have to, such as these calves right here, may have to wean, basically dry lot those calves in a corral where we provide them everything that they're consuming, such as hay and the supplemental feed that would need to go along with that. You can I'll talk about the cost associated here after we talk about the last two. Mechanical weaning device, that's actually a device that goes over the nose of the calf. You put it on the calf while it's still on that cow nursing. It goes up to the cow, tries to nurse. It has a flap over it, and that calf is unable to nurse due to that. Only problems that we see with that is the effectiveness of actually being able to keep that device in the nose of the calf. Sometimes all of them will stay in, but you're probably going to have some that are going to fall out. And so if that happened on a calf that you were trying to wean, obviously it wouldn't be effective, and then you'd have to pull that calf up and corral wean it again. Then we have the fence line weaning method, and that's where you're going to have a solid fence in between the, I say solid, but what I mean by that is a calf fence that's basically indestructible from the calf and the cow. And so you typically want a pipe fence in between them, or a solid cattle panel fence in between these calves and the cow, because if you don't, if it's just simply a barbed wire fence, they're going to escape and get through there and get right back with that mama, or mama's going to get back with the baby. But if you've got a pretty solid fence through there, fence line weaning, it's going to minimize the balling that takes place with those calves and the cow. They're going to be able to get right next to each other, lay down next to each other. Very low stress method, and it's the most recommended method that we have through Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. And so just want to point on some of those costs that you're going to be looking at of preconditioning these calves. If you're having to provide everything to those calves, we're talking about if you're on a rural water where you don't have a pond available and you're having to fill water troughs, if you have that plus having to provide all of the hay and all of the feed to these calves, you're going to be somewhere in between about $35 to $50 a head. And so that's about what it'll cost you if you're in just a corral weaning method. If you're able to take these calves to grass, if you want to figure in a lease rate to yourself, or whether it's to yourself or to somebody else, plus some supplemental feed that you may be giving them, you're probably going to be somewhere between when you figure in all your vaccinations and everything that you would give these calves, you'll probably be somewhere between $15 to $25 a head. So very inexpensive to do it. Whether you have the space or not, obviously if you don't have the space and you have a corral and you have a water access, that's obviously a way that works, and you're still going to make money off of that. We've done some comprehensive surveys with some people over the last few years, and even those that did the corral weaning method, where they provided everything to those calves, they still profited at least $75 over. They achieved at least $75 per head over what they would have gotten had they have not preconditioned or backgrounded those calves. There's my contact information. Many of you probably have it, but I'll open it up at this point in time. I'll stop the share, and we'll stop the recording at this point.